Forget about trying to bring her back. Just let the red tape do its thing and let the paperwork run its course. That was my stepmom's voice, as flat and predictable as a weather forecast, coming from right near the edge of my hospital bed. I couldn't crack an eye open to see her. My arms felt like they were made of solid lead and wouldn't lift. The breathing machine was pumping air into my lungs in a mechanical rhythm I never asked for, and the whole room smelled like a mix of iodine, floor wax, and some weirdly sweet flowery scent that felt totally out of place for an ICU. My sister spoke up next, her voice hitting a much lower, more nervous note. What about her husband? What about Grant? My stepmother didn't miss a single beat or hesitate for a second. Grant didn't sign a thing. I'm the one with the legal directive. I hold the power here. My fingers were curled tight against the hospital sheet. I kept them perfectly still, holding my breath as much as the machine would let me. Welcome back to Real Reddit Revenge, where the deepest family secrets never stay buried for long. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to join our family, because this specific story is easily one of the wildest and most chilling ones we've ever had the chance to tell. Let's jump right into the details of it. That talk at the foot of my bed went down on a Monday morning, but the mess that led up to it started way before the machines, way before the heart monitors, and long before my stepmother decided I was worth way more to her 6 feet under than I ever was alive. My dad, Douglas Myers, hitched his wagon to Jeanette Harlow when I was only 17 years old. I'll never forget that wedding because it was the first time I'd seen my father cry since the day we buried my mother. But these were different kinds of tears. My mother's service was in December, gray skis, ice on the asphalt, and my dad squeezing my hand so hard his knuckles turned bone white. Janette's wedding was a June deal, a garden ceremony at her sister's place, and Douglas stood at the altar looking totally dazed and thankful, like someone had just handed him a second helping at a feast he thought was long over. Jeanette wasn't some obvious Disney villain back then. I really need you to understand that. She had her own kid, Kelsey, who was 14 and super awkward, standing next to me during the vows in a dress she clearly despised. Jeanette herself was 42 with a short brown bob and those sensible, practical shoes that screamed she wasn't here for any nonsense or drama. She'd been a bookkeeper at a medical supply company before she met my dad. She walked away from that job to be his full-time caretaker when the diagnosis hit, COPD, and eventually lung cancer. For 12 years, it was oxygen tanks, hospital runs, medication schedules, and a slow, patient decline. Jeanette managed every single bit of it. She hauled him to his oncology appointments in her old sedan with the cracked dashboard. She organized his pills in a weekly tray with those little blue lids. She even slept on a tiny cot in his hospital room the last 3 months of his life and never let out a single peep of complaint. At least, not when I was around to hear it. Douglas passed away 14 months before I ended up waking in this ICU. He was 67. I was 28, a newlywed to Grant, working as a freelance graphic designer from a desk in our spare bedroom. And there was one thing my dad begged me to do before the morphine started making his mind too cloudy. He asked me to sign a healthcare power of attorney nomming Jeanette as my decision maker. I was 23 when I signed it, totally single and trusting. Jeanette was the closest thing I had to a mother. My dad handed me the pen, and I didn't give it a second thought. I definitely should have thought twice. The first thing I felt after the total darkness was the beeping. One steady tone, echoing every 4 seconds, as cold and indifferent as a robotic metronome. Then the ventilator, a hiss, a puff, a hiss, a puff. Air shoved into my chest like someone was blowing up a balloon that really didn't want to be inflated. My mouth was parched. My tongue felt 3 sizes too big for my mouth. My eyes were stuck shut, not because I wanted them to be, but because of whatever the human body does when it reboots in the wrong sequence. I tried to wiggle my right hand. Zilch. Tried the left. Maybe a tiny twitch, or maybe I just imagined it. My legs felt like they belonged to a total stranger, heavy, far away, and totally numb from the waist down. Then came the voices. At first, they were just noise, blurry shapes of words without any real meaning, the way you hear a conversation in a language you don't actually speak. Slowly, the shapes got sharper. Said the neurologist is stopping by Tuesday. That was Kelsey. I knew it was her before the words even registered because of that perfume, vanilla and oat milk, so sweet it makes your sinuses ache. She'd worn that stuff since college. It was the first thing in that room I identified that wasn't medical. Tuesday is too late. That was Janet, closer now, on the left side of my bed, maybe standing or sitting in that vinyl chair I could hear squeak when she moved. A third voice popped in, male, older, very professional. Mrs. Harlow, the patient's condition is currently stable. We're seeing brain activity. We need to give the body some time to. She wouldn't want to live this way. Jeanette cut him right off, and I felt a cold chill run through my chest that had nothing to do with the air machine. I know my stepdaughter. She would never want machines keeping her alive. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt up, grab her by the arm, and say, "I'm right here, I can hear you, I am alive." But my body stayed pinned down, sealed and silent. My jaw wouldn't clench. My vocal cords wouldn't move. I was locked inside myself, and the woman sitting right next to me was trying to throw away the key forever. Kelsey's voice came from by the window. "How long before they actually?" "You know," Jeanette didn't even pause. "There's a process, we just have to be patient." The manila folder showed up the next morning. I heard Jeanette's heels first, 3 sharp clicks on the linoleum, then the softer sound of her sitting and that unmistakable noise of a metal clasp being unfastened and paper sliding out. She didn't shut the door all the way. The hallway noise, a rolling cart, a distant intercom, leaked in through the edges. "Look at this." Jeanette's voice was low, aimed at Kelsey. Paper crinkled. "Douglas set the trust up so she gets the whole pot at 30. All of it. $4 million. The number just sat there in the air. $4 million. I'd known about the money in a general way. My dad brought it up twice, once when I turned 21 and again right before he died. He said it was my mom's life insurance money, invested and grown for over 2 decades. He'd set it to release on my 30th birthday. I hadn't looked into the fine print. I didn't think I needed to. Kelsey's voice shook. "She's 29, 6 days. Jeanette's voice was tight and controlled, the way she sounded when she was calculating something in her head. 6 days and she hits 30. If she's alive when that happens, every single cent goes to her. Not us, her. But if she..." Kelsey's voice trailed off. "If she doesn't make it to 30, the trust reverts back to Douglas's estate, which, according to the will, lands with me." A long pause. "All of it." I lay there, breathing to the machine's rhythm, and felt the whole world rearrange itself around a fact I hadn't understood until that second. The trust wasn't just cash. It was a clock. And Jeanette had been counting down the days since the moment I was admitted. 6 days. That was the price of my life to the woman who made my dad's soup for 12 years. Not because she hated me, not because I messed up, but because a bank account and a calendar had aligned in a way that made my death convenient. I heard her snap the folder shut and drop it on the nightstand. The clasp clicked. I felt the weight of it right there, 3 inches from my hand, like a verdict someone had already signed. Grant and I had this Tuesday tradition. It started back when we were first dating. He was in construction, still is, and his crew worked Monday through Saturday, early starts, long days, the kind of work that leaves your hands raw and your back stiff by Wednesday. But every Tuesday at noon, no matter what, he'd call me. Not a text, a real call. He said texting was like leaving a note on a door instead of actually knocking. The first Tuesday he called, I was sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor eating cereal out of the box and trying to design a logo for a plumber in Ridgedale who wanted something classy but tough. Grant asked what I was doing. I told him. He laughed. He had a laugh that sounded like it surprised him every time it happened. After we got married, those Tuesday calls stayed. Sometimes they were 2 minutes. Sometimes 20. The content didn't matter. He'd tell me about a beam that came in warped or a new guy on the crew who couldn't read a level. I'd tell him about a client who wanted their website to look more blue, but not blue. We didn't solve anything. We just checked in. The last time I talked to Grant before the accident was a Tuesday morning. He asked if I needed him to come with me to the cabin. Jeanette had called that morning, invited me up for the weekend, said Kelsey missed me, said the cabin needed someone young to help with the gutters. I told Grant no, I'd be fine. It was only 2 hours up the mountain. He said, "Call me when you get there." I said, "I always do." Lying in that hospital bed, counting the hours, I kept thinking about that phone call. Grant didn't know I was here. Or rather, he thought he knew. Jeanette had told the hospital he was overseas. She called him and told him I was stable, just resting, and that no visitors were recommended yet. My husband was out there somewhere, probably on a job site, probably thinking about calling me Tuesday, not knowing that the woman he trusted to watch over me was measuring the distance between my birthday and my coffin. I didn't know any of this yet. I learned it later. But lying there, I felt Grant's absence like a missing tooth, a gap where something solid used to be. The first time Donna Kowalski walked into my room, I had no idea she would save my life. She came in at 11:47 p.m. I know the time because she said it out loud, the way nurses do when they're logging vitals. 11:47, checking lines, room 412. Her voice was different from the daytime nurses, lower, unhurried, with the kind of steadiness that comes from doing something 10,000 times. Jeanette and Kelsey had left hours ago. The room was dark except for the blue glow of the monitors. The hallway was quiet. That particular middle-of-the-night quiet that hospitals get, where the silence isn't really silence, but a hum of machinery and muffled footsteps and the occasional page over the intercom. Donna talked to me not because she thought I could hear her, at least not that first night, but because it was what she did. 23 years of nursing had taught her. She told me later that talking to unconscious patients was just good practice. You never know who's listening, she said, and it's a lonely business being in a coma. All right, sweetheart, let's check your lines. Her hands were warm and dry, and they smelled like betadine soap, that sharp, clean, amber scent that every hospital worker carries on their skin. She adjusted the IV drip, checked the ventilator connections, and pressed 2 fingers to my wrist. Professional, quick, but gentle in a way that felt different from the way Jeanette touched me. Jeanette's hands were cold, always had been, and when she touched my arm earlier that day, her fingers pressed in a way that felt less like checking my pulse and more like checking my temperature the way you'd check whether a steak was done. Donna wrote something in a small notebook she carried in her scrub pocket, not the hospital chart, her own notebook. I'd learn later that she kept one for every shift, every patient. Timestamps, observations, things the official chart didn't capture, little details, patterns. She clicked her pen, slipped the notebook back into her pocket, and paused at the foot of my bed. You hang in there, sweetheart, she said. Then she walked out, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum, and I was alone again in the blue light. I didn't know it then, but that notebook would become the most important document in my life. Day 2. Jeanette and Kelsey came back at 9:00 in the morning. I'd been awake, truly awake, not just floating, for almost 30 hours. I'd learned the rhythms of the room, the shift change at 6:00, the breakfast cart at 7:30, the daytime nurse who hummed country music while she checked the IV bags. Jeanette pulled the vinyl chair closer to my bed. I heard the legs scrape the floor. Kelsey was somewhere near the window. I could tell by the angle of her voice and the faint scratch of her thumbnail against her phone case. They were quiet for a few minutes. Then Jeanette said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The mechanic did exactly what I asked." My heart rate spiked. I felt it, a surge in my chest, fast and hot like a fist clenching behind my ribs. The monitor beeped faster, 2 seconds between beeps instead of 4. "Mom," Kelsey's voice was sharp. "The machine." They both went silent. I forced my breathing slower, counted backward from 10 in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. The beeping slowed, settled. "Kelsey, that was weird." "Jeanette, machines do that." The nurse said it's normal. Kelsey waited a beat then. "You said it was just the brakes failing. You told me the brakes failed on their own." "They did fail." Jeanette's voice was flat. "I just helped them fail. The mechanic loosened the line. It wasn't complicated. Mountain road, steep grade, no guardrail on the first curve. The car does the rest of the heavy lifting." I lay there perfectly still, paralyzed by what I was hearing. Sweat had started to bead along the back of my neck, sliding slowly down into the itchy fabric of the hospital gown and pooling against the flat pillow. My stepmother had sabotaged my brakes. She had sent me up that mountain pass alone, knowing the fluid would give out on the very first curve, knowing I'd fly through the guardrail or veer off the shoulder and into the pines. She had planned every bit of it. She had paid someone under the table, and now she was confessing the whole thing to her daughter just 3 feet from my bed, using the same casual tone she'd used to describe a new recipe. "I helped them fail." Those 4 words haunted the room. My stepmother had literally tried to murder me, and now she was sitting close enough for me to smell the lavender hand cream she always used, planning how to finish what she'd started. Just 41 hours earlier, I was doing something as normal as watering a basil plant. It was Saturday morning, very early, with the sun just barely clearing the fence line. Grant had already left for the construction site at 5:00 a.m., a weekend concrete pour that his crew couldn't wait on. I was standing at the kitchen window wearing his old college hoodie, pouring half a cup of water into a terracotta pot that had been sitting on the sill since March. The basil was getting leggy and thin. I'd been meaning to pinch it back for weeks. My phone rang at 7:15 a.m. It was Janet. She sounded cheerful, which should have been my very first red flag. Janet didn't do cheerful without a hidden agenda. "Tori, honey, Kelsey's up at the cabin this weekend, and she's just been saying how much she misses you. The gutters really need a good cleaning, and I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if you came up? Just a girls' weekend." The cabin was 2 hours north, way up past Tillman Ridge, on a road that twisted through the foothills like a ribbon somebody had dropped from the sky. My father had bought the place long before he ever met Jeanette, a simple 3-room A-frame with a tin roof and a porch that looked out over a valley full of absolutely nothing. I hadn't set foot up there since his funeral. I said yes. I shouldn't have. But Kelsey had texted me 3 days before, saying something about feeling disconnected from the family, and I was still lugging around enough guilt about not visiting to say yes to almost anything that sounded like mending fences. I hit the road at 8:00 a.m. Grant's ringtone, that old country song my dad used to blast in his truck, went off as I was merging onto the highway. He asked if I needed company for the drive. I told him no. The first hour was totally fine. During the second hour, the road narrowed and started to climb. I first noticed the brakes around mile marker 42. They weren't gone yet, just soft. The pedal sank much deeper than it should have. I pumped it twice. It caught for a second, then released. The steering wheel started shaking violently in my hands. The guardrail came at me like a solid silver wall. I remember the sound, a grinding, metallic shriek. Then I remember the steering wheel spinning loose, the windshield turning into a white sheet of glass, and a thought that was clear, calm, and completely ridiculous. I didn't water my basil plant this morning. Then nothingness. Nothing for 3 long days. Back in the ICU on day 2, late morning. Janet was on the phone out in the hallway, and the door was cracked open about 4 inches, just enough for her voice to carry. Yes, her husband is overseas on a massive construction project. He's been extremely difficult to reach. There was a pause. "No, I'm her legal decision maker. I have the signed healthcare directive right here." I heard the daytime nurse murmur something agreeable. Then Janet continued. "I'd really prefer if we limited visitors." The doctors mentioned that too much stimulation could set back her recovery. No calls to the room and absolutely no outside visitors without my personal approval. The nurse, who sounded young and probably new to this floor, replied, "Of course, Mrs. Harlow. We'll make sure to note that in her chart." Grant wasn't overseas. Grant was 40 minutes away at a site in Barlow County, likely eating a gas station sandwich and checking his phone for a text from me that was never going to show up. Janet knew that. She called him the day I was admitted. I pieced this together much later and told him the doctors had everything under control, that I was heavily sedated and resting, and that visitors would only complicate the healing process. She used words like protocol, observation period, and the medical team recommends. Words that sound official enough to make even a worried husband hesitate. And Grant trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She was family. She made Douglas's favorite soup for 12 years. She'd held my hand at the funeral and cried what looked like real tears. She had a manila folder full of legal papers that said she was the one in charge. Kelsey came back from the vending machine. I heard the sharp crack of a soda can as she sat down in the vinyl chair by the window. What if Grant just shows up here? He won't. Janette's heels clicked back into the room, and the door shut firmly behind her. I told him she's stable and just resting, and that the doctors recommend 0 visitors for an optimal recovery. He's not the type of guy to push back on professional medical advice. She was right. Grant was steady and practical, a man who believed that when a pro told you something, they probably knew what they were talking about. Janet had banked on that. She had banked on his decency. My husband thought I was peacefully resting, and my stepmother had made sure that was the only story he heard. 6 months before he passed, my father called me into his bedroom. It was February, and the room was thick with the smell of eucalyptus oil and the old oak dresser. He was sitting up in bed, thin as a rail, with oxygen tubes looped behind his ears. "Sit down, Tori," he patted the mattress. His hand was mostly bone by then, but it was still warm, always warm. "I need to tell you about the trust," he said. He explained it simply, like a blueprint. "My mother had a life insurance policy, $2 million. After she passed, I invested it. Over 18 years, it grew to just over $4 million. I set up a trust for it. The payout date? Your 30th birthday, not a single day sooner. Nobody can touch it," he told me. "Not Janet, not Kelsey, not even you until that birthday. That's how I locked it down." I asked about Janet. He looked at the window, the blinds stripping the wall with light. "I've taken care of Janet in other ways. The house is hers. But this money, this is your mother's money, Tori, your real mother's." He said it like it was a sacred oath. I didn't ask what would happen if I died before 30. It never crossed my mind. I was 28, healthy and happy. But Douglas had thought about it. Hidden in those documents was a clause. If the beneficiary dies before the date, the money reverts to the estate. And Janet, per the updated will, was the sole heir. I didn't know that clause existed, but Janet sure did. To her, those words, "your mother's money," must have sounded like a locked door she was desperate to break down. On the afternoon of day 2, Janet left to meet with Dr. Callahan. I heard her heels fade down the hall. The room went quiet, save for the hum of the ventilator. Kelsey stayed behind. For a long time, she said nothing. Then I heard her breathing get uneven and wet, the sound that comes right before someone breaks down. She moved closer. "Tori," her voice was a tiny whisper. "I didn't want any of this." She sniffled and wiped her face. "Mom said it was the only way. She said you'd never even know. She said the accident would look like brakes just fail sometimes, right? On mountain roads. She said it happens all the time." Kelsey's voice cracked. I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. I thought she was just talking. You know how she gets." I did know. Jeanette talked about murder the way she managed pill schedules with precision. "Your dad left you everything, Tori. Everything. Mom got the house, and that's not nothing, but there's no cash left. The medical bills ate everything that wasn't locked in that trust. Do you know what it's like watching your mom count coupons at 54, clipping them from the Sunday paper because she can't even afford the digital apps?" Kelsey's voice was rising, a mix of tears and anger, not at me, but at the math of it all. "I owe $87,000 in student loans. I have a degree I can't use because nobody's hearing. My boyfriend dumped me, and I'm 26 living in a dead man's house." She exhaled hard. "I'm sorry, Tori, I really am." Then I heard her pull out her phone. Her thumbnail tapped the screen. One quick text. I'd learn later it was just 3 words. How much longer? That night I started counting. Not the time, but the patterns. The daytime nurse every 2 hours. The shift change at 6:00. Donna at 10:00, 2:00, and 6:00. I mapped my day around the windows of safety. Between 2:00 and 6:00 a.m. during Donna's gap, I was truly alone. I used those hours to test my body. I started with my toes, a curl, a flex, a release. It felt like an electric ache, but it happened. Movement. Then my fingers, my left hand was stronger. I practiced making a fist under the sheet over and over like squeezing a stress ball. My throat was the real hurdle. I could swallow, but my voice was locked away. I tried to whisper, but only a hiss of air came out. I had no phone and no voice, but I had one thing Jeanette didn't know. I was awake. Day 3, Jeanette caught Dr. Callahan outside my room. "Dr. Callahan, I need to discuss the timeline." Her voice was measured but had a core of steel. "She's been in a coma for 3 days. The EEG is minimal. I have the directive to withdraw life support." Callahan spoke slowly. "Mrs. Harlow, I respect the directive, but hospital protocol requires 72 additional hours of observation before we can proceed with that." 72 hours, Jeanette's cool exterior slipped. That's almost past her." She went silent. I felt the tension in the air. "Past her what, Mrs. Harlow?" "A beat, 2 beats. It's past what I can handle emotionally. I've been here every single day, Dr. Callahan. I need closure. Callahan didn't buy the act. I could hear it in the way he paused before responding. It wasn't long enough to be rude, but it was long enough to be deliberate. 72 hours is the standard protocol, ma'am. I'll schedule the full evaluation for Thursday morning. If her results haven't shifted by then, we'll discuss the next steps. Thursday morning. My birthday was Thursday. 72 hours from Wednesday morning put the clock right at Thursday at dawn. If Callahan ran that evaluation at 8:00 a.m. Thursday, the trust would have already paid out at midnight. Jeanette would lose every cent. I heard her heels start packing in the hallway. 3 steps, pivot, 3 steps back. It was the sound of someone doing desperate arithmetic in her head and absolutely hatting the answer. Is there any way to speed this up? Jeanette asked. A second opinion, maybe a transfer to another facility. You're welcome to get a second opinion, Mrs. Harlow, but a transfer would just reset the observation clock. The packing stopped. I heard her exhale, a sharp, controlled sound, the kind you make when you're swallowing a scream. 72 hours. I didn't know if that was enough time to save myself, but it was all I had left. Night 3, 9:15 p.m. The hallway was quiet, well past visiting hours, but Jeanette had used that healthcare directive to get after-hours access. She and Kelsey came in together. I smelled Jeanette's lavender hand cream before I even heard the chair legs scrape the floor. They whispered. Not out of concern for me. They thought I was about as responsive as the mattress I was lying on, but out of habit. When you're plotting something criminal, your voice drops whether anyone is listening or not. I called Reinhardt this afternoon, Jeanette said. He says we can file for an emergency court order to override that 72-hour protocol. Compassionate withdrawal. A judge can sign off by Thursday morning. Thursday morning is her birthday, Mom. Kelsey's voice sounded tight, like a wire about to snap. I know that. That's why I need the order signed by Wednesday night. If we can get a judge to authorize the withdrawal on Wednesday evening, the hospital has to comply immediately. She'll be gone before the clock strikes midnight. If you've ever had to lie perfectly still while someone planned your murder 3 feet from your face, I can tell you this. Your body wants to scream. Every muscle, every nerve. Every fiber that evolution spent 1,000,000 years building. All of it is screaming move, fight, run. But the part of your brain that kept our ancestors alive in the wild, the part that knows sometimes the only way to survive is to play dead, that part says, don't move. I didn't move a muscle. Kelsey, what if she wakes up before then? She won't. The doctor said brain activity is minimal. She's gone, Kelsey. We're just making it official. My stepmother was writing my eulogy while I counted the seconds between her breaths. Peppermint tea. That's what her breath smelled like that night. She had a cup in the cafeteria, and she was sitting close enough for me to feel the warmth of each exhale on the back of my hand. I had a deadline now, Wednesday night, less than 36 hours. If I couldn't find a way to get word out before Jeanette got that court order, she'd have the legal authority to end my life with a judge's signature and a doctor's nod. I clenched my fist under the sheet, just once. Then I opened it and waited for Donna. I know what you're thinking right now. Why didn't I just bolt my eyes open and scream? Why didn't I move? If you've ever been trapped in a body that refuses to listen, you already know the answer. Your muscles don't cooperate. Your voice hides behind a wall you can't break through. But here's what I need you to know. I was fighting with everything I had. 2:14, Donna's second check of the night. The room was dark, and the monitors cast that blue-green glow that made everything look like it was underwater. Donna came in quietly, she always did, but tonight she moved even slower than usual. She adjusted my IV line, checked the ventilator readout, and then did something she hadn't done before. She lifted my left hand to check the pulse point at my wrist. My finger twitched. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. My body just did it. A spasm, a flutter, the smallest contraction of a muscle in my index finger. But Donna felt it. I know because her hand went completely still. Her breathing changed, and she didn't let go. Torre, her voice was barely above a breath. Can you hear me? I tried again. I concentrated every ounce of whatever neural pathway was still functioning into my left index finger. It moved. A definite, voluntary flex. Donna didn't gasp, she didn't call for help, and she didn't rush out of the room. She just stood there, holding my hand, and I felt her thumb press gently against my knuckle. A squeeze. Brief, professional, and the warmest thing I had felt in 3 days. Then she let go. I heard the click of her pen and the scratch of her writing in her notebook. I couldn't read it, but I found out later what it said. 2:14, responsive finger flex. Left hand. Voluntary, 2 instances. Patient may have awareness. She paused. I heard her look toward the door, a shift in the direction of her breathing. Then she clicked the pen closed and slipped the notebook back into her scrub pocket. She didn't tell the daytime staff, not yet. She told me later that she needed to be 100% sure. 1 flex could be a reflex, a random firing. 2 was interesting, but she needed more before she'd risk saying anything. Because if she reported awareness and Janet was the healthcare proxy, Janet would find out. And something about Janet made Donna uneasy. "You hang in there, sweetheart," she whispered. Then she squeezed my hand one more time and walked out, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum. In the dark, I curled my fingers into the sheet and held on. The next night, night 4, Donna came back at 10:00 p.m. She closed the door all the way this time. I heard the latch click. "Tori." Her voice was quiet but direct. No warmth this time, just clarity. "I'm going to ask you some questions. If you can hear me, squeeze my finger once." She placed her index finger in my left palm. I squeezed, 1 deliberate contraction. "Good, twice for no." Silence. "Then are you in pain?" 1 squeeze. "Yes." "Can you open your eyes?" 2 squeezes. "No." "Is there someone you want me to call?" 1 squeeze. Immediate, hard. "Your husband, Grant." 1 squeeze. "Is his number in your phone?" 2 squeezes. My phone was gone. Jeanette had taken it from the wreckage. I didn't know where it was, but I knew it wasn't here. Donna was quiet for a moment. I heard her breathing, steady and deliberate. "Listen to me carefully." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been a nurse for 23 years. I've seen a lot of families. Most are scared and doing their best, but some..." She paused. "I don't know your stepmother, but whoever told us your husband is overseas, I don't think that's true. The way she talks about your treatment, the urgency about withdrawal, something doesn't sit right." I squeezed her finger again, hard as my weakened hand could manage. "I'm going to find your husband. I'll use your old records. You were here 2 years ago for a wrist sprain, and there should be an emergency contact on file. I'll call him tomorrow." She paused again. "But you need to do something for me. You need to stay perfectly still. Don't let anyone know you're conscious. Not the day nurses, not Dr. Callahan, and especially not anyone who might mention it to your stepmother. Can you do that?" 1 squeeze. Don't let anyone know. This time, those words were on my side. She patted my hand and opened the door, letting a thin rectangle of hallway light cut across the floor. Then she was gone. For the first time in 4 days, I felt like someone knew. Wednesday morning, day 5, the day before my birthday. Jeanette arrived at 7:00 a.m., earlier than usual. I heard her before she reached my room, talking on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was clipped and businesslike. The Janet she showed the nurses was soft and grief-stricken. The Janet on the phone was someone else entirely. "I need the order signed today," she said. "Not tomorrow, today. I was told the judge could have it ready by Wednesday evening. Yes, I'll come to the courthouse if I have to." Another pause. "Because every day we wait is another day she suffers. That's what I'll tell the judge. Compassionate withdrawal. Compassionate." She used that word like a tool, something you pick up, use, and put back in the drawer. Jeanette ended the call and came into the room. I heard Kelsey arrive a few minutes later. The vanilla oat milk, the soda can, the phone case scratch. "The lawyer says we can get a court order by tonight," Janet told Kelsey. "The judge has agreed to an emergency hearing on compassionate grounds." "Tonight," Kelsey's voice was thin. That means we go to the hospital tonight with the order. Dr. Callahan has to comply. The withdrawal begins before midnight." Jeanette paused. "And by morning, it's done." "Thursday morning is her birthday, Mom." "I know what day it is, Kelsey." The words landed like stones dropped into a pond. "Can't we just..." Kelsey started. "No," Jeanette's voice was flat. We can't just wait. If she turns 30, we get nothing, not a cent. Do you understand? Your student loans, my medical bills, the mortgage payments Douglas stopped making. None of it gets paid. We go back to counting coupons. Is that what you want? Kelsey didn't answer. Wednesday night. That was the new deadline, not 72 hours. Janet had found a way around the protocol. A judge, a court order, a piece of paper that would authorize the hospital to pull my ventilator before the clock struck 12. I had maybe 12 hours. Donna had maybe 12 hours. Janet wanted me dead by tonight. But it was Tuesday, and on Tuesdays, Grant called. He didn't call me because my phone was gone, but he was about to get a call from someone else. Donna found Grant's number in the records from my wrist sprain. She called from the break room during her lunch at 12:15 p.m. The only window she had that wasn't monitored. Grant picked up on the second ring. Donna told me the conversation lasted 4 minutes. Mr. Myers, my name is Donna Kowalski. I'm a nurse at Ridgeview. Your wife, Tori, is in the ICU. She's been here since Saturday. Silence, then Grant's voice breaking apart. What do you mean she's in the ICU? Her stepmother called me. She said Tori was stable, resting. She said the doctors recommended no visitors. Sir, who told you that? Janet Harlow. She called me Saturday night. She said, he stopped. Donna heard him breathing hard. She said there was nothing to worry about. Donna waited. She told me later she could feel the anger building on the other end of the line. Is my wife alive? She's alive, and she's awake. More silence. Donna let it sit. I'm coming, Grant said. Don't come to the front desk. Her stepmother has restricted visitor access. Come to the east entrance, 4th floor, after 10:00 p.m. tonight. I'll meet you at the stairwell. Is she, his voice caught, is she okay? Donna paused. Then carefully, she squeezed my hand, Mr. Myers, twice. 3 words before he hung up. He said, she's my wife. Grant was at the east stairwell by 9:47 p.m., 20 minutes early. Donna told me later that he was still in his work boots, and you could still see the concrete dust in his hair from the job site. She led him down the hallway as quietly as possible. I know this because I heard every second of it, 2 sets of footsteps, one soft-soled and familiar, and the other heavy and slightly too fast. It was the unmistakable sound of a man trying his hardest not to run. The door creaked open. The room was pitch black. Donna pulled the door shut behind them and whispered in a voice barely above a breath, "She can hear you. Go ahead." Grant's footsteps crossed the room toward me. He stopped right at my bedside. I could smell him immediately, concrete dust, sweat, and that faint cedar soap he's used every morning since I met him. That scent undid something deep inside me that I'd been desperately holding together for 4 days. My throat started to ache. My eyes burned behind my sealed lids. He knelt down. I felt his knees hit the linoleum and felt the mattress shift as he leaned his weight forward. Then his hand, rough, large, and still warm from running through the hospital parking lot, wrapped around my left hand and held on tight. I'm here. His voice was thick and cracked right in the middle, the sound of a man fighting every instinct in his body to stay quiet. I'm here, Tori. I'm not leaving. I squeezed his hand. One single squeeze, the absolute hardest I'd managed since I first woke up in this nightmare. I heard him exhale a shaking, uneven breath, and then there was a long silence. It was the kind of silence that only happens when someone is crying without making a single sound, shoulders trembling, jaw clenched tight, and hot tears falling onto the hospital sheets. Donna gave him a minute of privacy. Then she pulled a chair closer and sat down across from him. I need to tell you exactly what's been going on. Her voice was calm and clinical. She laid out the power of attorney. She explained Janet's erratic behavior, the visitor blocks, the frantic push for the withdrawal, the emergency court order being filed. She walked him through the 72-hour protocol and Janet's cold-blooded attempt to bypass it. She explained everything she'd overheard through cracked doors and recorded in her personal notebook. Grant just listened. I felt his hand tighten around mine like a vice as every piece of the puzzle finally fell into place. When Donna finished, the room was silent. Then Grant asked, "What do we do now?" "You call a lawyer," Donna said firmly. Tonight, preferably one who specializes in trusts and estates, and then you call the police. Grant didn't let go of my hand for the rest of the night. He sat in that vinyl chair until 5:00 in the morning, right up until Donna told him he had to clear out before the day's shift rolled in. He stood up, pressed his lips to my forehead, and whispered something I'll keep between just the two of us. His hand was the last thing I felt before he left, rough, warm, and steady, not letting go until the very last possible second. Wednesday morning, 7:15. Grant had been gone for 2 hours. I was alone when the door opened. No knock. The first thing I noticed was that perfume, vanilla oat milk, and my eyes clamped shut so hard it actually hurt. Kelsey sat down. She didn't say a word for a long time. I heard her set a cup of coffee down, the cardboard scrape on the bedside table echoing in the quiet. I heard her shift in the chair. Then she leaned forward. She was close enough that I could feel her breath on my skin. It smelled like coffee and something sour underneath. She was staring at me. I could feel the weight of her gaze like a physical hand pressed against my cheek. Your eyelids moved. My heart rate spiked instantly. I felt it, a lurch, a stammer in my chest. I prayed the monitor wouldn't betray me to her. I kept my face a total blank. I relaxed my jaw and forced my breath to follow the ventilator's rhythm. In, out, in, out. Kelsey was quiet. The monitor beeped. 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. She said it like she was making a mental decision. I heard her lean back, then forward again. Her hand touched my wrist, light, uncertain. Not like a professional nurse, but more like someone poking a fire they think might still be lit. I didn't move. Not a flicker, not a twitch. I emptied myself out. I let every muscle go slack. I let my face become the face of someone who was already gone, exactly the way Jeanette wanted me to look. Kelsey stood up. Her chair scraped the floor. I heard her walk to the doorway and stop. Mom, she called out into the hallway. I think she might be more responsive. Her eyelids moved, and her heart rate jumped for a second. Jeanette's voice came back, distant but ice cold. That's just reflexes. The doctor said it happens. Involuntary eye movement, heart rate spikes. It doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it. It really looked like she was. Kelsey, Jeanette's voice hardened into a blade. She's not awake. The specialist confirmed it. She isn't coming back. Kelsey didn't argue, but she didn't leave the doorway either. She stood there for another 10 seconds. I could feel her eyes on my face like heat from an open oven, and I held every muscle in my body so still that my own heartbeat sounded like a drum in a cathedral. Then she finally turned and walked away. Grant called Martin Falk at 6:30 Wednesday morning, sitting in his truck in the hospital parking lot with the engine off. Falk was the attorney who had drafted my father's trust 15 years ago. He was 71, semi-retired, and answered on the third ring with his full name. Martin Falk. Grant told him the whole story. I heard this later in pieces from Grant, from Falk, and from the police report. Falk confirmed the trust, $4.2 million. Distribution date, Thursday at 12:01 a.m. If Tori passes before distribution, the trust reverts to the estate. Jeanette Harlow, as the sole heir, gets every penny. If your wife is alive at midnight tonight, Falk said, the trust distributes automatically. Mrs. Harlow gets nothing. She's alive, Grant said, and she's awake. Falk called Detective Morrison at the sheriff's office. Morrison was 43, ex-military, and according to Donna, the kind of guy who made decisions like he was defusing a bomb, carefully, methodically, with no wasted motion. Morrison wanted evidence, and Donna provided it. Her notebook, 23 years of habit, had time-stamped entries for every shift. It documented visitor logs, Janette's whispers through the door, the visitor bans, the lie about Grant being overseas, and the frantic push to end my life. Dr. Callahan, when confronted by Morrison, confirmed that my brain activity was actually showing steady improvement, consistent with someone waking up, not fatting out. He agreed to hand over the full medical records. Donna faxed her notes at 11:00 p.m. Wednesday night. The machine hummed and clicked, spitting out 18 pages of observations in her tight, careful handwriting. Donna didn't even know she was building a criminal case. She was just doing her job the same way she had since 2003. Then there was the manila folder. Detective Morrison got a copy of the healthcare directive Jeanette had given the hospital. He also got the original from my father's estate lawyer, the one filed 3 years ago when I was 23 and single. They didn't match. The original let Jeanette make basic medical choices, but it said nothing about withdrawing life support. The version Jeanette gave the hospital had an extra page, page 4 of 4. It had a specific clause authorizing the withdrawal of ventilation if the patient was in a vegetative state. My signature was at the bottom, but it wasn't real. Morrison's analyst found it was a scanned copy of my signature from the original, digitally pasted onto the forged page. Jeanette had added a page that gave her permission to kill me and signed it with a digital ghost of my own hand. Morrison called Grant at 11:30 Wednesday night. "We have enough," he said. "Attempted murder, break, tampering, conspiracy, forgery. We can pick her up in the morning." "Morning," Grant's voice was sharp. "She's filed for a court order. It won't be granted. I've already talked to the clerk. But if we arrest her tonight, we tip our hand. We need to document the court order attempt as more evidence." Grant didn't like it, but he got it. You don't pour the concrete until the forms are set. The manila folder that was supposed to end my life became the evidence that ended Jeanette. Thursday morning, my 30th birthday, 8:00. Jeanette and Kelsey arrived together. I heard Jeanette's heels, confident and brisk, with Kelsey trailing behind. Jeanette was clutching papers. "We need to speak with Dr. Callahan immediately," Jeanette told the nurse. "I have a court order authorizing." The door to room 412 opened. But it wasn't the doctor. It was a man in a dark jacket who said, "Jeanette Harlow." "Yes, who are you?" "Detective Morrison, County Sheriff's Office. Kelsey Harlow, are you here too?" Yes, I'm right here. What is this about?" Kelsey's voice was an octave higher than normal. "Jeanette and Kelsey Harlow, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud." The room went silent. Not hospital quiet, dead silent. "This is absurd," Jeanette snapped, her voice fraying. "She's in a coma, you can't possibly." I opened my eyes. The light hit me like a physical wall, white, blinding, and sharp after 5 days of darkness. I blinked once, then twice. The room resolved. The blue monitors, the IV stand, the morning sun pouring through the window, and Jeanette standing at the foot of my bed. She had the manila folder in one hand and the court order in the other. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. I looked her right in the face. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. 5 days of silence, and everything I had to say was right there in my eyes. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers stepped in. One started reading their rights. Jeanette stood perfectly still, like she'd been hit by a truck but hadn't felt the pain yet. Kelsey collapsed into the vinyl chair and sobbed, loud, messy, gulping sobs that shook the whole frame. Grant appeared in the doorway. He was still in those work boots, concrete dust still on the cuffs. Donna stood right beside him, technically off the clock but still in yesterday's scrubs. Dr. Callahan came in last, looking like a man who just realized he'd been played by a patient's family. Jeanette looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us blinked. Then they led her out of room 412, and the morning light stayed right where it was. 2 hours later, a man I'd never met walked in with a leather briefcase and a birthday card. Martin Falk was 71, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and the posture of someone who had spent 50 years reading the fine print. He set the case on the table, opened it with 2 clicks, and pulled out a folder, not manila, but white, with a blue tab that said Myers Trust. "Happy birthday, Torrey." He said it without a hint of sentimentality, the way a notary stamps a document. It was a fact, not a greeting. Grant was in the chair beside me, his hand wrapped around mine exactly as it had been since the police left. Donna was still by the door. She refused to leave until Falk arrived, even though her shift had officially ended 9 hours ago. "As of 12:01 a.m. this morning," Falk said, adjusting his glasses and reading directly from the trust instrument, "the Douglas R. Myers Irrevocable Trust has fully vested in the sole beneficiary, Torrey Lauren Myers. The total value of the trust, as of the most recent quarterly statement, is $4,217,000. He looked up from the paperwork. It's yours, all of it. No conditions, no contingencies. Jeanette Harlow has no claim. The Slayer statute, which your father's attorney was wise enough to include in the trust terms, would have disqualified her even without the criminal charges. He paused for a moment. Your father thought of everything, Ms. Myers. I stared at him. My throat was raw. The ventilator had been removed only 2 hours earlier, and every breath felt like I was swallowing sandpaper. But I managed one word, the very first word I'd spoken in 5 days. Thank you. Then I looked at Donna. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching the scene with the expression of someone who had been doing this for 23 years and had long since stopped being surprised by anything, except maybe this. Her eyes were wet just barely, the kind of moisture a woman like Donna would blink away before anyone had a chance to notice. Both of you, I croaked. My voice was gravel, barely audible, but the room was quiet enough to hear it. Donna gave a small, knowing smile and a nod. Then she turned for the door. For the record, she said over her shoulder, your vitals were never as flat as they told me. Her sneakers squeaked down the hallway until the sound finally disappeared. I held Grant's hand and watched the morning light move across the ceiling of room 412, and I thought, I'm 30. The recovery took much longer than the crisis. 3 weeks in the hospital, followed by 2 months of physical therapy at a clinic on Magnolia Street. The waiting room there always smelled like lemon disinfectant, and someone had taped motivational posters to every available surface. My legs came back first, shaky and unreliable, like I was learning to walk on a moving boat. My voice took longer. The vocal cords had been strained by the ventilator tube, and for weeks, I sounded like I'd gargled a handful of pebbles. Grant said he didn't mind. He told me he'd listen to me read the phone book if it meant I was talking. Jeanette's case moved through the system the way these things do, slowly, methodically, and with a mountain of paperwork. The charges were severe. Attempted murder for the brake tampering. The mechanic she'd hired folded within 48 hours of questioning. Conspiracy to commit murder based on the documented plan to withdraw life support before the distribution. Forgery for the altered healthcare directive. The forensic analysis was definitive. Jeanette's bail was denied. The judge cited her as a flight risk and noted the calculated cruelty of the charges. Kelsey took a plea deal, conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory after the fact. Her attorney argued she was under her mother's toxic influence, which was partially true and partially convenient. She cooperated fully. She handed over text messages, confirmed the timeline, and testified about conversations I'd already heard from my hospital bed. The judge gave her 3 to 5 years. She wrote me a letter from county detention. It was 4 pages long, handwritten on yellow legal pad paper. She apologized. She explained. She asked if I could ever forgive her. She talked about her student loans, her mother's medical bills, and the bitter feeling of watching my father's money go to me while they counted coupons. I read every single word. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, though I was for a long time, but because some relationships can't be repaired with a letter any more than a car can be fixed with an apology. The damage was structural. You don't just tape a cracked axle. The house my father left Jeanette was subject to forfeiture proceedings once the conviction went through. I sold it and added the proceeds to the trust. My mother's money, my father's house. All of it finally where it was supposed to be. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just need to stay exactly where they are with nobody crossing them ever again. 6 months later, I was sitting at my desk. The spare bedroom was still the spare bedroom, same desk, same window, same view of the backyard, but it felt different now. I'd repainted the walls a pale sage green. Grant said it looked like a doctor's office. I told him it looked like a room where someone was finally alive enough to pick a paint color. I was working on a logo for a bakery. I was on my 3rd draft, and none of them felt quite right, but I wasn't frustrated. I was just working. Working felt like breathing, ordinary, automatic, and entirely precious. My phone rang at noon. Tuesday, Grant's number. Hey, His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man calling from his lunch break on a job site with sawdust on his sleeves. "How's the logo?" "Flowery," I replied. He laughed, that laugh, the one that still seemed to surprise him every time it came out. "Want me to bring home anything?" "Just you." "Deal." I hung up and looked out the window. On the kitchen sill, the basil plant sat in its terracotta pot. I'd repotted it in August after the old pot cracked during a heat wave. The new pot was slightly larger, giving it more room to grow. The basil had taken to it immediately, the way living things do when you finally give them a little space. I thought about that Saturday morning, the last normal morning, the one before the mountain road and the failing brakes. I'd been standing at this window pouring half a cup of water into that pot, and my biggest concern was whether to pinch back the stems. Then Janet called, and I said yes. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and cut 3 leaves from the basil. I set them on the cutting board for dinner. The leaves were bright green, almost translucent in the afternoon light, the color of something that had survived a drought and come back thicker. The basil was growing. So was I. 1 year later, I went back to the hospital, not as a patient. I walked through the east entrance, the same one Grant used that Tuesday night, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was identical. The linoleum, the muffled intercom, the particular hum of the machines. It was 10:00 p.m. Donna's shift. I waited by the stairwell holding a white, rectangular box tied with a simple ribbon. Inside was a pair of high-end nursing shoes, the kind with memory foam and reinforced arches. I'd looked up what nurses actually wanted, and the answer was always better shoes. Donna came around the corner at 10:12, notebook in her pocket, stethoscope around her neck. She saw me and stopped. "Tori!" She said my name like she was confirming a diagnosis. "Hi, Donna." I held out the box. She looked at it, then at me, then took it. She opened the lid, pulled out one shoe, and turned it over in her hands like she was inspecting evidence. "You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to squeeze my hand at 2:00 in the morning, but you did." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she put the shoe back, tucked the box under her arm, and we hugged. It was a short, tight hug, the kind between 2 people who know that anything longer would require a conversation neither of them was ready to have. "Get out of here," she said, but she was smiling. "I have patience." I walked back down the hallway past room 412. It was someone else's room now, someone else's monitors, someone else's fight. I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my car for a minute. The engine was off, the windows were down, and the night air smelled like cut grass. Some people save your life with surgery. Some save it with a phone call. Donna saved mine with a notebook, a squeeze, and a pair of squeaky sneakers. I started the car and drove home with my eyes wide open. That's Tori's story. 5 days of silence, 1 nurse who noticed, and a birthday that came just in time. If this story reminded you to check your healthcare directive or update your emergency contacts, take that as a sign. Do it today. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe to Real Reddit Revenge, and I'll see you in the next one.